Transferable skills.
From Cackle Media, this is Transferable Skills. I'm Noah Mishkin. Today's guest is Kwait Zollo, who shares her skills journey from transaction services into venture capital. I hope you enjoy. Really excited to welcome Kwait Zollo here to the show. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Let's begin at the beginning of your career. What does that look like? What is the job that you were in when you first started?
So I did my undergrad in accounting and finance from Indiana University. So I was in the business school and I'd interned for 2 summers after my junior year and after my senior year at KPMG in Chicago. I was fortunate enough after the internship to be offered a full-time offer and was in their transaction services group. And I really didn't understand what that was until getting in there, because you think about the big 4 accounting firms and a lot of people do audit or tax. So transaction services rolled up within advisory. And at a high level, we were basically working for private equity clients when they were looking to do their M&A. And they would hire my team to go in and do all of the crazy deep financial due diligence on the companies that they were looking at acquiring. So that's really where I learned a lot of the hard technical Excel, data monkey shortcuts. And this was, years ago, where there wasn't as many of these data warehousing tools that made it easy to do the financial modeling. So we were running things on a supercomputer and files were crashing left and right. So it was a really crazy time to be there, but I certainly learned a lot of the technical skills, and that's kind of where things started out for me.
If I'm understanding correctly, is your responsibility working at KPMG, you're on the finance, transactional side, M&A, due diligence. Your responsibility is to essentially dig deep into their financials, their processes and methodology and practices.
Yeah. So we were on the financial due diligence side of things. So not as much the management process piece. It was, hey, this is maybe a family-run company and they're looking to sell it. So the private equity firm was assessing it as an opportunity to acquire. They hired my team to really go into like the P&L, all of the financials, and put together a whole set of reporting that was pretty standard with all these deals that we would do. It was like a 50-page report that went into the quality of the earnings and the different customer segmentation and a whole waterfall analysis and more of that to eventually get to almost like a EBITDA multiple. And that's really how they started to understand, what should they be paying for to acquire these companies. And I think about that thread in terms of something that was harder for me to get behind is that, I was very low on the totem pole. So we were just told, hey, go run these analyses, go in Excel. And I just felt very much at an arm's length from the company. I think that's what really inspired me, and I will continue my career trajectory. But I felt like we were behind the scenes, really putting together this report, passed it off to the private equity firm, and 99% of the time it was pencils down and the deal didn't happen. And if they did, then it was really on the private equity firm to then have their own people go in and operate and make decisions on these companies. So that was kind of frustrated for me because I felt like I wasn't really able to tactically get in the weeds myself. It was just go run this report, pass it off, and then move on to the next deal.
There was no advisory part of your responsibility. You're basically just reporting, but you're not advising or providing any kind of perspective or strategy to the person.
Exactly. Yeah.
Was that unfulfilling?
Yeah, 100%. And that's where a couple years in, I was starting to think about what my long-term career would look like. And I just felt like that was not the place that I saw myself being long-term.
Who trained you to do that job well? And really, what were the skills that were required to do that job well?
Yeah. Something that I'm very grateful for within my KPMG experience was how much they invested in training their young postgraduate employees. They put a ton of resources. They would send us for weeks at a time to do very deep, in-depth training and exercises. And that's really where I felt like I got a lot of investment personally in terms of how to tactically do this type of work, right? Like I said, the Excel shortcuts and all of the different modeling, they had a whole framework for training on that. And then there also was a whole professionalism and just etiquette piece that I certainly learned on the job. And we just had a lot of support internally. We had mentors across different levels, and they really invested in the leadership and being part of teams with different layers. So we were able to have a lot of visibility internally for how to navigate this larger, massive global organization.
Yeah.
They really did invest in making it more of a digestible way to start your career there.
How much of your own personal skills, strengths, or personality is put into that work? Can you break down maybe how much of that work was following exactly their formula versus how much of your own perspective and strengths are you influencing in that process?
I'd say it definitely over-indexed to the formula.
Yeah.
And I think that was something that I was a little bit averse to because I didn't get to feel like I had the autonomy and creative thinking that then I really gravitated towards within the startup ecosystem. And I understand why those worlds should be different because there's rules and regulations and there's just a different level of oversight when you're working at a public accounting firm versus building a startup.
Right. Talk about also like the fact that you're recently out of college, you're still learning and
And that's
expanding.
why there were so many layers in oversight. So everything had to go through many layers of approval and review and feedback until it eventually became the report that we gave to the client.
You're describing the training that you got, the strengths that you have, and the interests in the work that you're doing, but it wasn't completely fulfilling. Part of that was the lack of autonomy and interjecting your own personal strengths and personality into the work. But what other parts of the job maybe had you second guessing or questioning how much longer you wanted to do this?
I think a big piece was personal time management. I think when you're in client services, you're really at the helm of your client. And that scared me a little bit. I wouldn't know if I was coming into the office one day and staying till 5 p.m. or 3 a.m., candidly. And sometimes I'd come in and be told I was getting on a plane the next day. And this is my first year living in a new city, trying to make new friends. And I felt like that lack of control over my time. And I was all about working very hard, but just not being able to plan because of so much uncertainty was just something that was really difficult for me. So I think that was one piece. And the other was just some of the internal politics, and that's everywhere. And I certainly
For sure.
navigated that along my career. But within this client service role, you're effectively assessed based on your billable hours. And sometimes that was, again, out of your control based on the client you were assigned to and how long and how many hours you were billing. So it seemed like that was also something that felt semi out of control, that I was going to be assessed and incentivized based on something that I wasn't always in the driver's seat of.
There's actually also a lack of motivation because if you're not in control of the outcomes that trigger certain compensation reward systems, then at some point, pretty quickly, the individual is likely to not push as hard as maybe the incentive is supposed to be for.
Exactly.
You must have gotten to a fork in the road or even a breaking point or something where you made the decision to say, I got to see what else is out there. When was that?
Yeah. So I credit my now husband to a lot of that thought process. When I started dating him, he was an early employee at Grubhub here in Chicago. And every week, he was one of their early sales guys. He'd get on a plane, go sign up 100 restaurants, come back, and the company was just growing like crazy. And it really started to get me inspired around the startup ecosystem and what other types of companies were being built here in Chicago. So I started looking on Indeed and just doing some research. And I stumbled onto a job opportunity, a financial analyst role at a startup in Chicago called Trunk Club. I started researching it. It was a men's personalized styling service. I grew up obsessed with retail and e-com. And I literally fell in love with the company. I had never felt such a visceral reaction to like wanting something so badly. I felt like this was like meant for what I wanted to do next. So came on as their first financial analyst and was able to leverage, talking about transferable skills, a lot of the tactical skills that I learned at KPMG, but then I got to start applying it within this really fun, special organization that was growing very quickly.
It's a while back now, but are you able to identify what it was that had you so excited and feeling like this is exactly it?
Yeah. So much of it was the people. I think that I had only seen, like, through the internship and then starting within KPMG, one type of culture and organization. And I just immediately through my interviews there saw how passionate everybody was because they're all on the same team working together and kind of like I was alluding to before, was just polarizing different than the culture I had come from. And then getting to have almost the freedom to say, hey, we're growing really quickly and now we're ready to bring on people to start almost becoming like an internal consultant for the company and helping us figure out with data how to drive different decisions and work cross-functionally. And it was just this magical combination of getting to apply, again, the hard skills into a company with a vision that I just personally resonated with. I just felt like I had to get the job. And then once I had it, I just did everything I could to really capitalize on that opportunity that I felt very grateful to have.
When you came on board, did they already have defined all of the OKRs and KPIs? So objectives and key results are what you're striving towards. And then the KPIs are the indications, the key performance indicators that are leading towards identifying performance. Did they have all those things identified already, or was part of your job to create new ones?
It was both. I think at a high level, we certainly had some KPIs, but that was really how my team evolved, was really within a strategy and data analytics perspective, and setting the KPIs, setting them even more granularly by each team and how those roll up to the overall KPIs of the organization. My team every week would put together this KPI dashboard, and going back to like the data warehousing conversation, that was one of the really cool experiences I got to see through my timing there. Was we had a BI team, business intelligence team, that had come from Redbox, and they really institutionalized this idea of building out data warehouses and then putting on different data visualization platforms on top of them. So we used Tableau at the time. And that like rocked my world. I felt like I had only understood data in Excel and pivot tables and doing all these crazy things within Excel that I was saying was crashing the files. And this was just, I understood it effectively, but I had never actually built within these data visualization platforms. So my team was working hand in hand with the BI team and understanding, okay, what data is this business capturing? How do we start building different ways to structure the data and then put all the different types of visualizations on top of them? So I can nerd out like forever on that. It was so fun. And one of the first projects I was on was operation analytics. Again, I knew more finance. I didn't understand operations, but at the end of the day, it was just data. And it was taking upwards of 20 minutes to pack one box. That obviously doesn't scale. So my team kind of got in the weeds and figured out how to build more efficiency within that process and shrunk it down to, I think, 6 minutes. So it was crazy. And that's where my team started to keep expanding, because every team within the company started to say, hey, we need the strategy and data team to help us make our lives easier and being, leveraging data, how to have decisions be made for our teams.
It's super exciting. You're not on the BI team. Are you on the marketing team? Are you on operations? Or are you on finance? Which department is your position?
We started our own team called Strategy and Data Analytics. So we worked very cross-functionally. So we had different analysts on our team that would work with the customer service team, with the stylist team, with the operations team. And we were almost, I think, the way I always think about it now in hindsight is like we were kind of this like internal management consultant team within the organization that would then go project to project and be almost like outsourced to each of those verticalized teams.
Super awesome. Sounds like there probably were very few boring days.
Exactly.
Can you define data warehousing?
Yeah. So really the infrastructure to build out the data sets. So as all these tools internally were creating data, this was the place that really stored the warehouse, the data warehouse, that then we were able to put on the data visualization platform like Tableau so that we can query against the data. And that I really learned on a job, because I never really had to learn SQL. That's really where we had the BI team that was querying the data and structuring in such a way. And in my mind, that started to click, because I was really like, oh, like these pivot tables, I get Excel, I get the data. Let's put now all these really cool tools on top of them that created the opportunity for the leadership teams to filter different things and just get data a lot more accessible. So my team was very much like the conduit between the technical data people and the executives that were trying to easily find and filter the data.
So to collect the data, to store it, you need to have it in a way that is also the ability to recall the data as needed. You want to be able to ask a question a year from now or 5 years from now and be able to draw upon the data, your historical data, the
Mhm.
legacy information that you didn't know you needed then, but you do have access to now. And by doing that, your data warehouse is essentially organizing and structuring your legacy data so that way you can build the reports as needed as new information is sought after. Yes?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying that. What were maybe some of the challenges you had in that transition from such a formal corporate environment into this startup world?
Yeah, I'd say getting the confidence to feel like you can raise your hand and have an idea and run with it. I felt like the culture KPMG, like I alluded to, was being told, go work on this project and having a formula to say this is what the workload was going to look like. And this was complete other kind of flip of that where it was, hey, at a high level, yes, we set the KPIs and we knew what we were marching to, but there were so many ways that you can creatively think about tests and new revenue streams and things to really ideate within the organization to move those metrics. That was the complete like freedom thinking and really credit to the executives for building up a culture that was super bottoms up. So anyone, regardless of any level, felt empowered to raise their hand and say, "Hey, I have an idea," and run with it. It's very much the culture of like do things that don't scale, break things, learn, test and share, results with data to drive decision making. That was really what was celebrated. And I felt like that's really where I realized that was more my style and personally where I felt like I was incentivized and excited about using more of those types of muscles.
The freedom and autonomy that you are seeking still has an adjustment period. How long were you there? And then where did you go from there?
Yeah. So I was there for about 3 years. About 9 months after I joined, the company actually got acquired by Nordstrom. So that was a crazy whirlwind of getting to see a company grow so quickly that got acquired and then really see the kind of pre and then post acquisition. So right after we got acquired, I really got to be on this cool internal team that helped launch the whole women's part of the business. So the business started just for men and Nordstrom came in, acquired it for $350 million and said, "Hey, women's is a big part of our business." There was a company called Stitch Fix out on the West Coast that was growing really quickly, started for women. And going back to what I said about learning how to empower decisions and raise your hand, I said, "Hey, I want to be part of building this. This is literally a dream job to build this startup within the broader startup." So for about a year, I was part of this almost like tiger team that got to launch the women's business. And there was a group of us completely cross functionally between strategy and styling and merchandising. And they gave us a ton of freedom to say, go figure out what would our brand look like for women. But I felt like 3 years in, once we were able to bring women into the fold and it became actually a bigger business than the men's business, I started to feel like I wanted to go build again. That experience really felt super entrepreneurial. And post acquisition, as companies get bigger, internal priorities and autonomy changes, right? As it
Yeah.
should. So that was really where my wheel started turning about what was next. And there was a similar concept for kids in Chicago called Mac and Mia that had just raised a seed round. And I came on as the fifth employee to really go leverage all of those skills and apply them to a similar business, but at a much earlier stage.
Your jump into Trunk Club and then the next role is so wild to me because your primary focus in your job at KPMG was to provide a valuation, but also a perspective on this company that's looking to be acquired. But
Mhm.
now you're in these companies and you've gone through that. Very meta. What was that like from your perspective to go through an acquisition, having been on the sort of outside finance valuation side in the past, and then to now go through that at Trunk Club, and then to now insert yourself at even earlier stage
Yeah.
as the fifth employee of a startup?
Yeah, it was crazy polarizing. When I thought about my career holistically, I wanted to fill in the gaps. I felt like when I joined Trunk Club, it felt like a startup because I came from KPMG, but I don't know, it was probably like the 200th something employee at that time versus Mac and Mia when I came out, I was employee number 5. So I felt like that was really where the decision became more clear because I personally wanted to feel like I can prove to myself that I can come in earlier because I had all of those experiences and learnings and skills to start building upon.
How many years into Mac and Mia did you join?
So the company had started probably about a little under 2 years before I joined.
What was that experience like in those early days?
Yeah, it was crazy. And I think I was in more of a leadership role with even more power
Yeah.
around how to drive more of the team. And I think, again, that was kind of what I was solving for. I felt like I had an amazing manager at Trunk Club, but now I was managing teams. I was working with the CEO and the president, and I was really championing everything from a business perspective, what the KPIs were, how we were trending. And one of the interesting parts of that business, quite differently than Trunk Club, both of them were personalized styling businesses, but Mac and Mia had remote stylists. So a lot of them were moms or people working with their communities, and we gave them this gig opportunity. I think we had 3 stylists, maybe 5 when I joined, and we grew that to about 300 over the 2 years there. And it just felt like I had a lot more oversight and ability to have more of an impact.
Did you ever find yourself in a situation, especially in the first number of maybe months, where you were at risk of over engineering or over analyzing certain data simply because you did at that point come from a robust background in large and emerging growing businesses where either you were frustrated or you were just too ambitious and it wasn't yet time for that?
Yes, to all the above. But I'd say that's where intentionally one of the first hires I made was a very technical data analyst and BI analyst. And super credit to him, he was able to really architect a lot of the data and find ways to build out the data sets so we can start asking all those questions because the team was just so much smaller, right? Like I said, with this 75-person engineering team at Trunk Club and probably at Smack, like a 10-person BI team. Like we just had so many resources at our discretion that I probably took for granted because we had ideas that we can talk to a team and they would just go execute. This was, hey, okay, you have these ideas, great. You kind of are informing them because you have this experience, but you actually need the resources to then go streamline, build. And that's really where I was super intentional about finding people that had more of the technical SQLing and data skill set that then could marry more of the strategic, higher level thinking and framing of analyses that we wanted to then go run.
So about 2.5 years, you're at Mac and Mia, and then you move into the next step of your career. What is that?
Yeah. Yeah. So venture capital had always been something in my almost like pipe dream. I'd always been thinking about entrepreneurship, and working within these startups really got me to catch kind of that like startup bug. I'd say through the Mac and Me experience, when I was really the one internally helping with our financial due diligence for investors that were looking at the business, putting together the board materials, sitting in those conversations with VCs, it seemed like a little bit of a different type of relationship where sometimes these investors we were pitching, they'd never operated before. They had never rolled up their sleeves and worked in these companies. And that started to make me think, maybe I do have skills that would make me a good investor because I had seen the company through the crazy growth, $1 million days that got acquired. And I had seen a company that really found it hard to scale and probably made some decisions that with hindsight, I maybe would have advised differently. So that really got me thinking about the career path as the next step. And very grateful to my partner, Ezra, who got the fund off the ground. He was at actually one of the investors of Mac and Mia. So he was a VC at another fund that had led that seed round. And he was spinning off in the year before kind of Mac and Mia was finding its next home. And I started talking to him about what he was doing. He actually had invested in a company, and initially we were hanging out and he was thinking about telling me about this company to go operate at. And I said, that's cool, but venture is always something I've been thinking about. He kind of had this thesis about the everyday consumer I had worked in consumer startups and I felt such an alignment with that thesis. So came on right when the fund had closed. Again, no venture experience, but a decent amount of operating experience. And he had at the time about 8 years of venture experience. So they say in this world, it's very much just an apprenticeship job, and you need to work alongside people whose track record you admire, whose way of thinking and style really resonates and aligns. And very grateful for the timing of that lining up. And now fast forward almost 6 years in, this is, I think, the longest I've been in a career. And it's very empowering that I still feel like I'm low on the learning curve. It's something that challenges me daily and excited to kind of unpack all the skills that compounded. But I feel, yeah, very lucky for the way that the timing of all of these inflections started to pan out.
Do you think that you know how to ask the right questions because you've worked in these startup companies?
I think so. And I think it's even more than the questions. It's the depth of the conversation that I think I can have with a founder is different than an investor having that same conversation who has never worked inside a startup before. I was sitting with a founder yesterday who was in town from Minneapolis, and we were just jamming on ideas. And I lend on that my experience so frequently around the parallels. And I think it's just the way that I'm groomed now to bias towards like action and idea and then execution. And it's very much like the scrappy way of thinking, which is quite different than your academic, like investor type of thinking, especially at the early stage. That's something I've really understood now being inside the VC ecosystem. From the outside looking in, like there's just so many venture funds and you're not really sure how they are different. But the early stage is where a lot of the startup skills come into play because a lot of times you're investing in a founder and a small team, right? It's
Yeah.
quite similarly to the team that I was joining at Mac and Mia. And I think I just get really excited about the types of conversations that I can have with founders just because I want to give hindsight around experience and I want to like layer my networks and have worked with amazing people that are now thinking about their next move and they want to know the companies we're investing in. So that's a lot of what we do as well. And this is one of the big skills that I feel like I had around the scenes, but I really got to capitalize on in this role is just networking and connecting people. I think that I've always enjoyed hanging out with people and getting to know people. But when you're inside an organization, you're doing a lot of the internal politics and relationship building, but you're not really picking your head up and thinking about the world outside of that organization. Venture is the total opposite. It's like how many disparate networks can you be a part of and make sure that you're bringing the right people together and sharing the opportunities and recruiting them and inspiring them to go join the startups you're investing in or connecting them to customers. Like it's just endless in terms of the power of people and relationships. And it's very addicting. Like it's people joke, they're like, how do you know everybody? I'm like, well, this is my job now. And I find so much joy in getting to meet such different types of people. And it's a really fun part that I totally did not understand was part of this job until being on the other side. And it just doesn't feel like work. It's genuinely very fun.
Drinking good earth tea.
Okay.
They always have some sort of profound thing on the back. It's like my fortune
Yeah.
cookie here. It says here, do more of what makes you happy.
I have a picture in my bathroom that says that exact same quote.
It sounds like you're doing that. You've
Yeah.
leaned into one of your strengths, your natural strengths that you have, not just an acquired skill. The acquired skill that you have been building on is perhaps the strategic and tactical networking. You like meeting people, you like making connections, and you're drawing on that to actually, a perfect example of taking what you love to do that might not be an obvious job per se or a skill, and realizing that it is a skill and how to interweave that into a strategic part of your job. I think it's a fantastic example. How do you approach conversations that are social or even potentially professional with certain expectations or productivity metrics? How do you ensure that you're getting value or providing value into conversations that are potentially just social, but also have real opportunity?
Yeah. I think this is where the investor hat has started to just ingrain in my way of having conversations with people for the first time. Because that's really the setting of these founder to investor conversations. A lot of times they're in person, sometimes they're on Zoom. But within a 30-minute window, you really have to figure out a sequencing of questions to feel like you're getting to know them as quickly as possible and navigate the conversation naturally. I think that's something that I'm always trying to be very authentic. That's sometimes within venture, you have to be a little bit more transactional. And that's something that I'm learning how to bridge those two. But I think at the end of the day, it's just about having like a intellectual and emotional curiosity about who this person is and find commonality. And then as that starts to build, figure out, okay, well, what's the win-win? What is top of mind for you? And how can I open up my network or my ideas to help drive that? And I guess Ezra said this to me early on, and I always have stuck with it, that this world is very much like karma driven, and putting good back into the world will eventually cycle back through. And I think I've channeled that in a lot of the relationships and people that I've met, is figuring out how can I do something to help somebody else? And hopefully that over time will start to pay it back.
So the TLDR is don't overthink it, but if you're genuine and authentic about trying to help others, it will come back and serve you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. The advice that I have given individuals in the context of funding is more often than not, especially early on in a business, the investors are really investing, let's say 2/3, 1/3, 2/3 into the leadership, the founders, as they are 1/3 into the product or service, because they need the confidence to know that we are investing in the individual who has the capability to, first of all, read the market and forecast, but then to be able to course correct or pivot when necessary in the creative solution that we need from that individual, because a product at market and as it matures is rarely a spitting image of its initial ideation. And so you need to make sure that you are investing in the individual more so to some degree than the product or service itself.
Yeah.
Is that
100%.
You said that a little bit earlier. Can
Yeah.
you describe that a little more?
Yeah, no, you're spot on. We actually have a line that we think and talk about internally that we invest in people markets people, which is another way of saying what you just articulated, that the people, the founding team, the founder, they are the ultimate visionary. Ideas are actually kind of cheap right now. And I'd say in the age of AI, it's actually way more democratized in terms of turning something into an idea, but having the wherewithal to be nimble and to stay prioritized and really juggle all the things. Like that's a very special type of combination. My husband's actually a founder now, so I'm living alongside that in real time. And I think that it's not for everybody. And it's something that we've learned around pattern matching for over the years. And I think I heard that term when I started in venture and didn't really understand what that meant. And now 6 years in, talking to 10, 20 founders a week, you just start to really figure out how to qualify for that and feel a type of way of assessing that, because it is hard and it is a skill that you really have to hone.
There is objective measures and there's subjective, and subjective should be that kind of minority part, but still important. How hard is it for you to not give advice all the time or when it's not asked for with your husband's business?
Yeah. It's hard. But it's something as an investor too, we really have to learn that we're not the day-to-day operators. We're more, I think, myself sometimes like a business therapist or an advisor. So we're here to be a sounding board, to ask the questions. But at the end of the day, it's their business and they're running with it. And we're just kind of here to help guide and advise behind the scenes.
Advise, mentorship, support. The other part to the advice that I have given about investing in the founders, the people versus market necessarily, is when you are looking to raise a round as a founder, that a dollar is not the same from every source. It's hard to land a deal. I know this and it is obvious.
Yeah.
But if you are in a position, you're fortunate to be given an offer, make sure also, especially when given options, but even in that one, that you're not just receiving funding. You need to know that this is a relationship too, that you are also investing in that VC or any angel. That person is coming to the table with more than just money, that they support your vision and that they are somebody that's going to also provide the guidance that you believe is a good match for your organization as it grows too.
Exactly.
and positive influence.
Yeah. And that's why you hear sometimes the analogy is dating adjacent, right? You're dating and then you get engaged and then you get married. Like there's a lot of parallels there. And especially within venture, it's a 10+ year relationship. And you really need to trust that person's there for like the good and the bad and the ugly and everything in between, because I think that's when like the true colors really start showing. And we are always the first to say, take off the book references, talk to founders that have had exits, that have not, because that's really where the real feedback, I think, shows is how we treat founders and how we interact with them. And like you said, not all are equal. So really care about that. And that's kind of like everything is our reputation and how we work with our founders.
The guidance you're giving is to ask people who've been there and done that, because they're going to have the real firsthand experience. That's exactly what you're doing at this VC right now, is you're taking your personal firsthand experience in those various steps. All three of the roles that you had prior to this in different ways gave you a lot of firsthand experience to help mature you into this position where you can give real advice and strategy that is coming from a trusted source. It's fantastic. It's a great way to, I don't want to say cap, because you never know where your future goes, but certainly to this end, this chapter in your career, it's a great way to partner all of your experience and put it into practice now.
Thank you. And it's, again, the only path I know, but I speak to a lot of people who maybe get their MBA and they're looking to break into venture, and they ask, should we go operate at a startup? Should we go right into venture? And I'm very biased towards go work at a startup, be part of an organization that you're excited about, that you're mission aligned. You get to work with cool people and have a lot of fun. I look back so fondly on those years. The learning curve is steep, but I think it is faster having been able to compound on those experiences and those skills. And I think it is relatable, right? You get to connect. And a lot of these competitive deals is getting the founders to choose you and choose your fund. And when we're all former operators that can talk about those experiences and open up our networks in different ways, like I think it does make us competitive as well.
Awesome. This has been fantastic. Great perspective, real strategy, tactical strategy, firsthand experience. And I really appreciate the depth and detail that you describe and have named all the different skills. I just want to say thank you for being here. This is great.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. This was such a fun conversation and looking forward to listening to the final product.
Absolutely. I want to thank Jen Koplow for recommending Haley as today's guest, and to you, our listeners, for joining us on this episode of Transferable Skills. Remember, the skills you've gained can take you anywhere. Until next time, keep exploring those transferable skills.